Yeah, and do you think they're exceptional casks? Or do you think they're just saying they're exceptional casks?
I mean,
no one opens them to know. So
yeah, well, that's a good point, actually.
Hey, welcome to Super Social Club. I'm Jeremy.
This is Whisky Industry. I'm Rob.
Welcome to the Whisky Rant Podcast.
It's a little crusty.
It's frustrating.
And it's going to be a little bit of a rant.
I don't understand it. I don't know why.
Some sort of injustice.
Anyway, end rant.
hello and welcome back to the Whisky Rant Podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Rob.
And in our presence tonight, we are gifted with the absolute legend himself, Ralphie. This is the third time on the podcast. Ralphie, thank you so much for joining us yet again.
And we are super grateful for that because this is not something that he does very often. So
the original whiskey ranter, Ralphie himself.
Yes.
There we go. Oh, bless you lots, guys. The original thingamabob, the original nuisance. That is my title in the whiskey industry, and I'm quite proud of it. And yes, let me see, we're in 2023, October 2023 at the point of recording, and I have managed to last, let me see, 14 years.
Yeah, a huge accomplishment. You just released your 1000th whiskey review, in which you did a 5-part series on Springbank, kind of like a little private distillery tour. I thought it was really insightful, a really cool thing. You opened up with episode 1 kind of as like a fitter philosophy kind of take, which I thought was really cool as well.
Yeah.
Some insight to your thoughts on the whiskey industry, a whole bunch of things in general, and then kind of took us through Springbank. Really cool, because we were all kind of thinking, what's Ralphie going to do for his 1000th review? Like, is he going to pull out something, that he's got on the shelf that's been collecting dust, something really interesting? This was an interesting take on your 1000th review. So kind of talk about your decision to do that instead of just like reviewing a single bottle.
Yes. 1,000 is quite a round number.
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that with the patience of whiskey fans and viewers, some of whom have watched all 1,000 reviews, I mean, you're talking about months worth of viewing, exclusively some bunnety guy, usually in the bothy, occasionally having a rant, and always giving an opinion, even when it's not perhaps an orthodox take in things, and it doesn't dovetail in with industry-led marketing messaging. And I think that's quite important. And I was conscious of this when I was thinking about what to do for the 1000th review. And as many folk in the whiskey sphere are aware, the first distillery I ever visited in my channel for a fairly substantial walkthrough was Springbank, and for a very simple reason, because I was fully aware that it was a small, very compact, old school distillery, which absolutely does everything from start to finish in-house manually. And this is something that is highly unusual, actually, in not just in Scotch whisky, but with any spirit makers anywhere in the world. So you have a situation where the grain arrives in the back of a lorry. It's then pumped into a steeping basin where it's soaked. And then after a good soaking, it's laid out on the maltings floor, where it's left to germinate. Of course, it'll happen more quickly during the summer and more slowly during the winter. But even at that point, a relatively inexperienced whiskey fan can say, aha, they're going not for efficiency of yield, not for alcoholic efficiency, but for flavor efficiency, because they're using practical experience rather than push-button technology to decide as and when the grain has sprouted enough to deliver a decent yield of alcohol from the sugars, but whilst retaining some of the proteins and some of the starches, along with the husk and the rest, which are going to contribute to the flavour. And I know some folk will say, well, hang about, Ralphie, husk doesn't contribute to the flavour of whiskey. Well, actually, it most certainly does if they've been using peat in the kiln, because husk absorbs a lot of peat smoke. So it's the walkthrough happened in about 6 sessions. And in retrospect, I missed out the washback, right? But that's because I was running out of batteries for my little flip cam the camera I had at the time. And I thought, well, I'll come back later and do it. But there was no need. And it was quite a compliment I got just visiting the distillery a few weeks ago to record the 1000th review, when one of the guys there says, hey, Ralphie, whenever, I was learning to do tours around our distillery, I watched your video from 14 years ago, well, 13 years ago.
Wow.
And that's basically gave me a kind of route plan and what to say and what to talk about when discussing it with visitors. And it surprises me now, guys, it really does, that there's still very few distilleries in Scotland even make a feature of the fact that they can do maltings on their premises. They can bottle on the premises using distillery water to cut down the strength of the alcohol if necessary. So when they're looking at fact that there's barely a single bottle of Springbank anywhere in the world that's gathering dust in shelves at the moment. Yep. So why on earth are other distilleries, particularly new start distilleries, not doing exact cut and copies of what Springbank are doing?
Agreed.
Now, from this, you've got a small distillery recently started in Scotland called Ralfy, and they've actually basically brought in a lorry to do some maltings in the back of the lorry, in the bed of it. So they're kind of putting a tarpaulin over the top, and it may seem a bit old-fashioned and rustic and extreme, but it's working for them.
So sorry, they're putting like essentially what we would call a transport truck, and they're doing malting in the truck.
Yeah, in the back of the truck.
Oh wow. And that's
exactly
working out for them.
It's a talking point. It's something that impresses people.
Yeah.
You think, that say, oh, well, I hope they gave the host out the back of that truck because they're dirty things and all the rest of it. Well, of course they have. They've thoroughly cleaned out the back of that truck.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're malting in the back of it is now an online conversational piece. And without doubt, we can already measure it, is bringing attention towards Lochleigh Distillery, which is then highlighting the fact that the manager there is very highly experienced, professional and competent, and spent most of his working life working at Lefroy Distillery in Islay.
Oh, wow.
Where, of course, they have their own malting floors. So he knows the value of it because he's worked with it.
Right.
And the fact is, when distilleries are buying in ready-made, ready-milled ground barley flour and husk to go straight into the sparging tank, they're getting a generic industrial product. They can't control the yeast. They can't control the kilning process. They don't, in fact, control the variability of between flavour and alcohol yield coming out that grain. And what I'm talking about now would never even have entered the conversation 10 years ago. But that's the power of geekery. That's the power of whiskey passion and the part of the authenticity of what is specifically an online conversation, which it may occasionally happen at a whiskey festival. It'll certainly happen in a whiskey club, but folk are genuinely interested in finding out how flavour gets into the bottle. And the more people know about this, the more people can make informed, better value purchasing decisions for buying whiskey. And this is why I've returned to Springbank, an important episode 1000. So I phoned them up. They said, "Hey, Ralphie, you're welcome anytime." So I just arranged to drive over in the Maltmobile, headed round to Campbelltown, spent a day with them, met a few viewers and fans as well who were also visiting the distillery, and got some lovely, informal, unassuming content, which it's not heavy duty. And I'd conclude by saying, sure, there was a distillery out there wanted to send me a bottle of 40-year-old single malt. And I said, thank you so much, but no, wow. I am not prepared to use my 1000th review to endorse your distillery because you want to gift me. It's very thoughtful, and, good luck to your, to your best efforts, but no thanks.
Do you want to name the distillery? We'll bleep it out.
I have a funny suspicion. I know who it is, but I'm not going to say.
All right. Well, I'm not going to say either, because the important thing, one of the important things about the online whiskey community is that we keep things civil, and we don't just slag off, ridicule, or blast anybody out there who in the industry that's just trying to get on with their job. And good luck to them. The job's a little bit more difficult than it used to be, particularly in marketing, when you've got people in the industry standing at tables serving and pouring whiskey, and then people come up to the table totally unassuming, just an ordinary member of the public, and within 10 minutes they've demonstrated that they know more about the distillery than the person actually standing pouring the draught.
That probably happens like quite a bit nowadays, you would think, because those people maybe just get like an infographic sheet, and they might not even have been to the distillery before, and suddenly you have someone coming in there with all this knowledge about their whiskey.
Well, they're ultimately hired because they're controllable.
Sure, I mean they're good salespeople, and they can do the spiel and whatever else. Ralphie, I think like for me, like for you choosing to go back to Springbank and kind of do this like 5-parter as your 1000th review, it kind of like speaks to, like you showcasing Springbank as like, this is how Scotch whiskey should be done. And like the results that you get from doing it this way are the best. And it's kind of like a message to the rest of the industry is like, guys, this is how you want to do it. Yeah. Is that kind of like what you were thinking maybe a little bit with that?
Yes. Definitely, Jeremy. And I'll go even further. And also, it's an informal vote of support for a new generation of distilleries globally, right, who are bottling at unchill filtered, at a nominally higher strength of 46% volume alcohol, natural color, and actually messaging about the practicalities and the provenance of production rather than disingenuous, appropriated spiel. And in continue and being very visible with this message, the small distilleries who are just getting started at the most difficult time of their lives, where they're going to be the shortest with cash, and they don't know if their product's going to actually work and be assimilated into the whiskey scene, and they won't know until they actually sell the product. And it's not the first bottle that matters, it's the second, third, and fourth. It's the repeat sales. Right. And this is why new distilleries need to be so careful to put out their whiskey when it's ready and not before. Also, when even putting out small volumes of their whiskey, don't inflate the price to drive people away, because that's most certainly happening. And it's not just happening in Scotland, it's happening all over the world, because it may be exciting. In the last 10 years, 14 years has been very exciting with all the new distilleries, the new awareness, the incredible usefulness and value of all online commentary. But it's nothing compared to the next 10 years when you're going to see an explosion in the American single malt whiskey scene. You're going to see an explosion across the UK, Britain, and Europe and Ireland of all these new distilleries which are appearing, some of whom are really just winging it, and others have got more knowledge and experience than the members of staff. And this is an advantage, of course, in Britain, in that many of the new distilleries are taking experienced, time-served whiskey professionals from bigger companies. And these people know what they're doing. And sure, they may not have the final decision in pricing and bottling and all the rest of it, but at least they're heading in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And of course, Canada, you guys are both Canadian. You have new distilleries in Canada. There's not that many, but there are more appearing. It's really interesting times because I notice that outside of Canada, there's more awareness of a new generation of Canadian single malt whiskey made authentically and delivered very successfully by the likes of Shelter Point, Macaloni's, and of course, good old Glenora in Nova Scotia, which was the distillery, of course, a Canadian distillery that kicked off the production, the foundation of my video channel. Right. Because I was raging at the Scotch Whisky Association. I was so angry at the time, guys, that they should demand that a Canadian distillery not use the word Glen because it might be confused with Scotch whisky. You know, how incredibly culturally arrogant. It beggars belief that here you have Glenora Distillery. Where is it? Nova Scotia. Oh, rightio. What does Nova Scotia mean? It means New Scotland. That's what it means. Right. And do you find any Scottish people or people of Scottish ancestry in Nova Scotia?
Absolutely.
I suspect you really, really do.
Yeah.
And yet this cultural arrogance within the higher echelons of the whiskey industry was giving this small distillery such a hard time for it. Unfortunately, the original owner lost his health as a result of it, and this is well documented. But it's great to see that distillery still going, which is why, spoiler alert, I recently bought another bottle of 10-year-old Glenbretton, which I'm reviewing for Ralfy Review 1001.
Thanks to today's sponsor, Lather.
They keep releasing some ridiculous smelling items.
The scents that they come out with are phenomenal. New one for the fall season, this soap right here, the Rustic Pumpkin.
Rustic Pumpkin is killer.
Yeah.
This one right here, Fresh AF, is exactly as advertised. French mineral clay plus green tea. It smells incredible.
Yeah, it does smell really, really nice.
Honestly, I had a chance to try these shampoos, both incredible. They have a tattoo bomb.
This is what I'm excited about because I have a couple of tattoos, and it's super important to keep your tattoo moisturized, especially when it's first done.
Yeah.
It's super, super important. Like every tattoo artist will stress, keep this thing moisturized. You want something that's more a natural product, which this is. It's perfect for anyone with a tattoo. You have to have it.
Absolutely. And keep your eyes out for some of the new scents. Sour spritz. This is like sour Skittles.
It is really good. It is really good.
The black cherry smells exactly like what you would think black cherry smells like.
Yeah.
And the eucalyptus lime is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that that's a great combo?
This black cherry musk beard balm is really, really nice.
Everything, honestly, Lather produces has been phenomenal. I've had only great experiences. There's nothing that I'm like, I wish I didn't get that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we love the product, and check out the link down below. Check out Lather.
Yeah, you got to check out Lather, guys.
There you go. Love
and
that.
Do you know what, guys?
That's awesome.
No spoilers, but the whiskey is even better than the first time I tasted it 14 years ago.
I love that. A full circle.
We should
All the way back
have a
around.
bottle as
all
well.
the way back around.
We should support that.
Why don't you tell them what we were drinking here?
Yeah. So to honor your 1000th review and your trip to Springbank, we decided to do a couple bottle kills of Springbank over here.
Yeah.
This is the 2020 21-year-old, which is one of the darkest 21-year-olds I think they've released in a very long time, as well as side by side with the Society released 28-year-old that was the miniature bottles, the 200 CL or the 20 CL, sorry, I should say, 200 milliliter bottle. Just because we knew that you had a banger of a Springbank that you talked about. If you guys haven't watched the review, you really should go watch all 5 parts. At the end, I'm not going to say when I just did kind of, but you talk about your favorite Springbank, which I'm not going to reveal unless you're willing to do that.
Well, I've got a bottle here.
Oh, there it is. Yeah,
There it is. I mean, this is the long row version, because and this isn't that long ago, but things move so fast now, guys, that 5 years is a long time in whiskey. And 5 years ago, I could go out and I could still buy Springbank, and I didn't have to join the ballot. I didn't have to join the lucky dip. I didn't have to join a 3-hour queue and wonder when the fight was going to break out and the police would have to be called. You know,
it's true.
These things happen. It's just, unfortunately, it's just gone a little bit crazy. But this is nothing to do with Springbank and everything to do with the consequences of providing what is simply a globally recognized, iconic spirit from Scotland's most important Scotch whisky maker. And good luck to Edrington and Macallan. I mean, when they come out with 95, 97, 100-year-old, and it's going straight into auction, and, you know, it's private clients here, there, and everywhere. I mean, good luck to them. I'm actually grateful to Macallan for taking the heat off genuine quality whiskies at affordable prices, so that the super rich are that busy stocking up on the name that they're leaving the better quality affordable whiskies alone. So I think Macallan are doing us a favor.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that, actually. We talked about that in regards to Ben Romick, because they're slowly picking up steam in North America now. And we're kind of hoping that selfishly hoping that it just dies down a little bit so that we can still
the
get
bottles
them.
Will still be available for us.
You know, the cask strength is still readily available here. It comes out. I mean, it sells out relatively quickly, but at least everyone's able that really wants to get a bottle.
Get a shot of it. Tell us about that Springbank, because when you mentioned it in your video as your favorite Springbank, I looked it up because I wasn't really familiar with it. It's the Rundlets and Kilderkins. That's right.
Do you know what these are?
It's like an eighth of it's like a quarter cask but smaller, right? It's like a very, very small cask.
Right. Rundlets are simply a small cask that would be used in breweries, and Kilderkins are small casks that would be used in distilleries. And they're really old school names. Before the advent of the term quarter cask. So the thing about the range, when Springbank bought them out, of course, there was no marketing, no forenotice. They simply appeared in the shops, and you had to jump in and buy what you could buy while it was still available. And I could see which way things were going with Springbank. So I bought about 4 bottles of each. I got 4 bottles of the Springbank Rundlets and Kilderkins, the Long Row Rundlets and Kilderkins, and the Hazelburn Rundlets and Kilderkins. And obviously, any whiskey fan will know that Long Row is peated Springbank, and Hazelburn is triple distilled Springbank, relatively unpeated. And with the influence of smaller casks, and importantly, these were active casks, they're really good quality casks, you have far more rapid maturation in a shorter space of time. And one of the consequences is that the actual integrity and the fullness of the spirit coming from the still goes over time more intact. So, I mean, these are non-age statement whiskies. I would reckon they were bottled 7 or 8 years. If they'd been in standard casks, they'd have been quite sort of, they'd have needed very active casks to balance them off. But being in small casks, they were basically super ready. Now, having said that, I've just noticed the 11-year-old age statement.
I was going to say, I thought these are around 10 or 11. Yeah, they're 2001 distillate. Is that right?
Let me show. Geez, where's the steampunker? So there we are. First blooper. I don't bother about bloopers anyway. I'm not.
The bottle that I looked up, because I was really interested in this one, because I hadn't seen the Springbank before.
No.
It was a 2001, I believe, vintage distillate, maybe perhaps, for the Springbank version. Very limited, 9,000 bottles. But yeah, really interesting. I've never heard of these casks. I mean, we hear of quarter casks, of course, but something smaller than a quarter cask I didn't even think even existed.
I feel like I had a shot at the Hazelburn and I passed up on it. Obviously, this was what, you said 5 years ago?
Oh no, it'd be 10 over 10 years ago.
Oh, is it that much?
Yeah. Is it really? I mean, time flies. I tell you what it is saying in the back of the label. Yeah, I've got the steampunk here and I can actually read it by getting the reflection, the light right in the back of the label, because it's got a bit of metallic ink in it. It's basically saying a Kilderkin, a Rundlet, is a small oak cask equal to an imperial measurement of volume of 18 gallons or 68 litres.
Okay. Not much.
So it's not much. I mean, these are really blood cask sizes.
In a quarter cask, you're looking at approximately 150 liters or so.
Well, this is specifically saying 68 litres.
Yeah. So it's like half the size of a quarter cask.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's an eighth of a cask.
It's an eighth of a cask. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
That's very cool.
What occasionally gets called a blood cask.
Right.
And the reason for the word blood is that it's the size of cask, about 60 litres, that will hold all the blood drained from a pig.
Interesting.
Right. Hopefully that's not what was in the cask before they put whiskey in it.
Well,
no.
There's a first for everything.
Well, yeah, really interesting bottling. So what do you kind of get there? Is it predominantly like,
is that a sherry cask?
Is it a virgin oak that they would put the spirit in there? Or like, would that cask have had anything before it?
I believe it has. I believe the cask has been seasoned with another spirit.
Okay.
There are times where it's very difficult to tell, and also the distillery is not giving too much away. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is whatever they've done, they've done a good job. Right. And this is really, really enjoyable stuff. And importantly, I mean, I'm thinking 5 years ago, it certainly could be longer, because I'm busy trying to look for a date in this. I've got a date. Brilliant. Bottled 2013.
Okay.
10 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah. So the shot I had at this was probably about 8 years ago when I first started the channel, and I was not really sure about Springbank yet.
Right.
And that
bottle was floating around.
Bottles were floating around, and I, passed up like an idiot and regret it ever since.
Well, they are available on the auction world, not like crazy expensive compared to other Springbanks. Maybe it's not as collectible as some others, but still quite pricey, of course. Really interesting. And of course, Ralphie picks one that is off the beaten path of Springbank that, you know, not too many people would have heard of before.
Right.
But yeah, no, really interesting.
I specifically picked it, Jeremy, because I enjoyed it so much at the time.
Yeah.
And sure, it was very available. There wasn't the huge surge of interest that has happened in the last specifically 3 to 4 years with Springbank. But having said that, certainly in the UK, there's people picking up Springbanks now, the younger Springbanks, at auction at retail price, or virtually at retail price.
Oh, wow.
And the reason for this is that the whiskey investment scene have suddenly discovered that their mortgage payments are absolutely rocketing due to the manipulations of the economy in the UK post-Brexit. And the consequence is that suddenly they need a bit more money. So they're putting their whiskey into auction. And because there is more supply at auction in relation to the demand at auction, they'll notice that they're on a waiting list, a longer and longer waiting list before their bottles actually go on sale. And this discourages people from putting on a limit price for the sale of their Springbanks, or if you want, Kilkerrins, because Kilkerrin is as an amazing substitute for Springbank.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget about the other options out there, such as Lechake. Lechake, 10-year-old, the non-age statement Sinclair Rioja, the 18-year-old's an absolute banger. You know, once you go on a little whiskey journey, a whiskey chase, you can find some amazing bottlings at relatively good prices. And an example recently that I tripped over, and this keeps me fresh, by the way, with my channel, is buying a bottle on a hunch saying, well, hopefully it'll be good. But then I pour a glass and suddenly I realize how good it is. And that happened recently with a very innocuous, unhyped bottle of whiskey that appeared in the British market called Maclean's Nose, which has been bottled by the relatively new Ardnamurchan Distillery.
Oh, yes.
And is a traditional Scotch. In other words, it's a blend of malt and grain whiskey from column stills, but it's predominantly a combination of Ardnamurchan and Glen Scotia. And it's relatively young, £32 a bottle, which probably equates to about 55 Canadian dollars. So it's superb value, really good quality. So when someone will come onto the channel and say, hey, Ralphie, I'm a student, I don't have much money, and I want to buy myself a special treat to see in the new year, can you recommend something? Say, no problem. Maclean's Nose, or perhaps you might want to consider, if you can find it, one of the Thompson brothers bottlings of their young 6-year-old or even their 8-year-old, which they've brought out recently. And let's not forget that there's other independent bottlers out there who are suddenly saying, if we can produce a super blend as an independent bottler, it's going to grab people's attention. So at the moment, you've got independent bottlers like Douglas Lang producing, you know, your big peat and your blended malts and other blended malts, a variety of blended malts, which offer really good value for money in terms of the quality. But I think it's going to be fairly soon that they put out as an alternative a new generation of traditional blended Scotch whisky at 46%, unchill filtered, natural colour, affordable price, and people are going to jump on it.
I have a question about so 1,000 reviews, a ton of videos with the extras and everything else. Now the OSWAs,
Online Scotch Whisky Awards.
Yeah. what's the vision? What's the vision with OSWA? Like, where do you expect this to go big scale where, you know, hopefully in the future we all go to Scotland and we're all dressed in
like the red carpet,
proper
and we go to the
attire,
theater, and it's a whole production.
So what's the vision with the OSWAs? Because for those of you that don't know, which I'm sure everybody listening does, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards,
November 4th,
coming out soon. You'll get to see who wins for 2023. Such an incredible thing you guys have done. A ton of work goes into it. I really commend you and Roy for all the work you guys have done for this. Just curious what the big picture for you guys will be. Do you believe that? I believe personally, I'll give you my belief after, but I want to hear what you guys think for it.
Right. It's an idea whose time arrived during pandemic lockdown. And I discussed it with Roy, just sent him an email, and then we discussed the Online Scotch Whisky Awards in light of the fact that within the space of less than a month, the entire Scotch whisky industry had been turned on its head by the catastrophic closure of bars, hotels, cancellation of wedding events, social activities, cancellation of whisky festivals. And suddenly they're sitting with all this whisky that they cannot sell. The only way they could sell it was online. The only way people could order whisky for delivery, for local delivery through the smaller retailers, was by phoning the shop and placing an order for delivery by courier, or by going online, buying online and having delivered through the postal service. And this was dramatic. This was a huge shock to the Scotch whisky industry. And like every other industry, they weren't prepared for it. And the consequences was that suddenly this highlighted how essential online activity was for the future of the Scotch whisky industry. And therefore the timing was perfect for the first OSWAs in 2020, towards the tail end, or toward the beginning of the end of the global, virtually. I mean, Sweden never went into lockdown.
No.
It never happened. They never closed the shops. They never confined people into their home. They never made people wear masks. And Sweden, latterly, it appears, never suffered any dramatic consequences as a result. But what happened, happened. And I think that many people, for many reasons, had their mindset changed. And one of the consequences was people who were maybe reluctant or occasionally using online starting to regularly use online. And then when you're not out socializing, you're not in the bar, and you can't go out, you're at home. What are you going to do? Put on your computer. What are you going to do if you're a whiskey enthusiast? You're going to look at more variety of whiskey content. And that is where the timing of the OSWA is important. And Roy is a perfect partner for it, because both Roy and I are very different people. He's gregarious, outgoing, positive, inclusive, and he likes to get the kind of the extended whiskey family going, whereas I'm the opposite. I'm grumpy, introvert, occasionally ranty. I prefer just to be in the bothy, in the middle of nowhere, and with nobody knocking on the door. That's the way I like it. That's the way I am. So the two of us, I say, right, well, if I do this bit, Roy, and you do that bit, Roy, and between the two of us, we'll finance it. So there's no third parties. So this is a Scotch Whisky Award. It's not just another award, because there's plenty of awards out there, from the World Whisky Award, the International Wines and Spirits, the Scottish Whisky Award, the Scottish Field Award. There's plenty out there. But we're transparently doing it on a completely democratic vote-led playing field, where it's a simple system, it's highly cost efficient, and there's no way we're going to get vast amounts of audience very quickly. It's something, just like the whiskey scene itself online, that's growing incrementally and steadily. And it's not so much the number of people who connect with the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, although that is most certainly growing. It's what people are getting out of it and how it is steering their whiskey purchasing. Because anybody could point to the short list of best Scotch whisky and say, well, you know, if you've got any of those bottles in your shelf, you've got a winner.
Right.
And importantly, although some are expensive, others are certainly not expensive. So you have the whole thing financed by my Patreon subscribers and Roy's Patreon subscribers, 50-50. And Roy and I sort of kind of manage the whole thing, manage the structure of the thing with the support of our social media content makers, who are doing a fantastic job. And then we have our contributors online, 65 contributors, including yourselves, guys, who are creating the nominations in each of the categories. We then get the vote on the nominations to narrow it down to 6. And at that point, it goes out to a public vote. So it's a very simple formula. And although the corporate-sized companies barely register its existence, the smaller distilleries, the independent bottlers, they really appreciate the fact that the OSWAs, the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, is authentically online and can only work online. You couldn't just lift it and dump it into a conventional format with 5-course meals in a grand hotel in the middle of Edinburgh and then invite all the distillers to pay X £1,000 a ticket just to attend, to applaud the winners. You know, I'm being cheeky. I know I'm being cheeky, but do you know what? The fundamental thing about the internet is it completely empowers the nobodies to do something and be something for other people who are just like us.
Yeah.
We're not, generally speaking, on the industry's guest list.
That's true.
And frankly, we don't need to be. We don't particularly want to be. It's actually a good thing to keep the separation, keep the distance, and whilst we do so, keep it civil, keep it sensible. And sure, there'll be the occasional bloopers, the occasional rants, but, you know, we're all looking out, whether directly or indirectly, we're looking out for one another. And if someone appears whose content is perhaps a little too driven by intoxication, they will get to know about it.
Mm-hmm. We wanted to get your opinion on the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, and specifically a category on Distillery of the Year. Springbank, of course, is up again. They won the previous year. We have noticed some disdain for Springbank as a whole because the availability is so limited, and a lot of bottles get picked up by people who are in for it for investment purposes or whatever. Yeah. Does Springbank, in your opinion, still deserve to potentially win Distillery of the Year despite their availability to the majority of people? Or do you think that people might look at a different distillery just because Springbank isn't available to them?
Mm-hmm. I get one vote, Jeremy. I can't make any decision in that. It's down to the voters. It's down to anybody and everybody online who's interested in whiskey and where they want to place their vote. So as much as there are detractors of Springbank who are frustrated that they can't buy the whiskey, I think the real direction of that frustration should be, well, why aren't other distilleries being more like Springbank? and delivering fantastic whiskey, which we really want to buy. And unfortunately, you have some whiskey producers who will bring out their annual release of special bottles of whiskey, and you look at the price and you think to yourself, seriously, are they taking the piss?
Right.
You know, there's no way on my budget I'm even going to contemplate paying that money for that product.
Yeah.
And I totally get it, because I understand that frustration, because I'm going out to buy Springbank, and I'm thinking, oh, forget it. I'm not even going to try and join the scrum or the queue. I'm not even going to be there. What else am I going to get instead of Springbank? Right, how about Kilkerran? Can you still get Kilkerran? Yes, actually you can. Where can you buy it? If you can buy it in the shops. In the UK, you can get it to auction for roughly the same as the retail price. So it's really swings and roundabouts. So people are now looking, well, what's going to be the next Springbank? So guys, do you have any idea from where you're sitting in Canada, what's the next Springbank?
I think based on availability, it has to be Benromic for us.
I mean, we've mentioned Benromic as an alternative to Springbank.
Yeah. I think just based on availability, that's the best option. We don't get enough of our of course I have to butcher Ardnamurchan.
We can't pronounce that distillery's name very well.
I think
you've pronounced it very well, Jeremy.
But the first time this is the first time I've done it right.
I've been trying to teach him how to pronounce it for the last 3 months, and then of course when I'm in front of you, I butcher it.
There's blooper reels being created right now of me butchering that name over and over and over again.
Let me give you the Scottish version. Ardnamurchan.
Ardnamurchan.
You gotta swallow the R.
Right.
That's what my Scottish friend said to me.
Swallow the R.
Yeah.
Yes, and spit it out again.
So yeah, I would think it's been. Yeah, I would think Benromic for us, just based on availability. We get the cask strength regularly. It's a phenomenal bottling. As far as non-peated, I would go Glenallachie. Glenallachie is probably that's my go. I mean, right now, based on availability, those two are my go-to: Benromic and Glenallachie.
I think that Benromic, like if you look at the influence and how much peat is influenced in their whiskey, it seems like it's on the same kind of plane as Springbank. Like you get a little bit of peat. It's not overwhelming like Isla stuff. And you do get this kind of like weird kind of funkiness to it sometimes with some of the Benromic bottlings. So yeah, I think that we would aim towards that distillery as being like an alternative for Springbank. I mean, of course, like you can't replicate Springbank. Nobody does it. They're so unique.
What I love, I mean, just the entire family run organization as a whole, the way Gordon MacPhail just, you buy a Gordon MacPhail 25-year-old and you're looking at a price that's a third of what the original bottling from that exact distillery would be, so
depending, of course, on the particular distillery name.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if it's a Spey malt, it's going to cost more, but, compared to Macallan, a 21-year-old cask strength Macallan, I think the exceptional casks go for beyond $6,000 in this area. So
more than that.
Yeah. So, I mean, $500, yes, it's expensive, but comparatively not so bad compared to the, original bottling.
Yeah. And do you think they're exceptional casks? Or do you think they're just saying they're exceptional casks?
I mean,
no one opens them to know. So
yeah, well, that's a good point, actually. I don't know. I can't speak to something I don't know, so I shouldn't speak to it. But
I agree with you about Benromic. As a distillery I've visited in the past, they've got a fantastic team there, very small distillery. And they produce fantastic quality of whiskey. What holds Benromic back is, in fact, the owners in the way that they present it to the whiskey world, because they're trying. They don't go full integrity. The version of Benromach you're both mentioning is the cask strength version, which is a really good single malt at an accessible price. But you're not mentioning the fact that both the 15-year-old Benromach and 21-year-old Benromach are bottled at 43%, and therefore, as a consequence, must be chill filtered. It doesn't make sense. It is almost this crazy mismatch of intentions, which confuses the identity of Benromach to the whiskey world. And despite the fact that they're aware of it, they choose not to do anything about it. And that's fine, because it leaves Benromach as something which the most informed whiskey fans can pick up on, and they will go for the cask strength. And earlier this year, I don't know if you had it available to yourselves, they had a Polish oak cask version, and that went down an absolute storm. And it was around long enough that the enthusiasts could buy it, and to the speculators and the investors and the folk who want to flip and cash in the future, it's really of no interest, because Benromach simply doesn't have that reputation. But the actual drinkers are picking up on it, because there's something very important that Benromach shares with Springbank, and that is the prominence of the savoury notes and umami notes in the sensation. In other words, the old school style of the spirit is not clean, fresh, and fruity. It is what you would call in the industry a dirty spirit when it's coming off the stills. It's not particularly palatable as a new make spirit, but put it in a cask for a period of time, and it will absolutely transform into something which at times becomes almost meaty. It becomes quite savoury. This sort of Japanese word umami, which is entirely appropriate. And you find these old-fashioned styles of elemental and outdoorsy malts are very much coming back into fashionability with really well-informed whiskey enthusiasts, which is another reason why people are now latching on more than ever before onto Edradour and its peated version of Balachin.
Yeah, which is delicious, by the way. Yeah.
Exactly. So what new distilleries out there have sat around the table and said, right, what are the whiskey enthusiasts talking about next, buying next, and drinking next? And it's not nice, clean, homogenized, chill-filtered, caramel-loaded whiskey vodka. People are not interested in that.
Yeah.
It's called blended Scotch.
There's a Canadian version that you're speaking to.
People are looking for the fullness of flavor that actually matches the developed palate that we all have.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just saying there's a Canadian version that fits the description of what you've just laid out, and it's Macaloni's. Their peated malts are unbelievable. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of trying yet, but their peated malts, Graham's doing an incredible job with his peated malts. He's using local peat. He's using Washington peat, which is like a few kilometers south of them, and then he's using some British Columbia peat as well. And we haven't had a bad peated malt from them.
And that whiskey is very, very young too. Very young. Very, very young.
Yeah.
Ralphie, just going back to Benromach.
Sorry to interrupt there, Jeremy, but there's something I really want to pop in here because you're Canadian, right? And it's that Macaloni's was being persecuted by the Scotch Whisky Association for using the name Macaloni, which the Scotch Whisky Association believed had too strong a Scotch whisky reference as a name, right?
He's
And
a Scottish.
therefore, Graham McAlone's was invited to change the name of his brand, which he refused to do. He reached out to a number of onliners and people within the whiskey industry to gather support.
Yep.
And I was one of the few who proactively got back to him. And actually had a bit, we had a few emails and then a video call. And I won't bore you with details of that, but a lovely guy, fascinating distillery, very substantial in its provenance. It could be even at this point in time, it could be Canada's Springbank. Time will tell.
Yeah.
But there was myself and the ex-editor of the whiskey magazine, Dominic Roscrow, who's sadly no longer with us. We're the ones who were proactively standing up and supporting through our own relative channels, McAlone's distillery. And it really, we kind of had a bit of a laugh, actually, because he was told that he couldn't use the word Caledonian, right? Now, this is Canada. So I said, that's not a problem, Graham. How about Canadonian?
Yeah.
How could the Scotch whisky industry take you to task and try and cancel you for using Canada and Caledonian fused into one word?
Yeah.
There was, and I mentioned it in my opinion, and I'm being careful what I'm saying here, there was a racist overtone to the persecution and victimization of McAlone's distillery, because McAlone is in fact an Irish surname, first and foremost, not Scottish. And for someone who is authentically using not just their surname, but their heritage in a country in which that heritage is very strong and totally legitimate, it can only be construed to try and shut it down ugly and a form of cultural racism. Now, that is really not something the Scotch Whisky Association wants to be too heavily connected with, in my opinion. I was happy to support the guy. He deserved it. And it was like history repeating 14 years later, after the nastiness towards Glenora Distillery and their Glenbretton brand. And here it was kicking off again on probably the most Scottish country in the world after Scotland.
Right.
Yeah, that's
you can't
factual.
make this up.
Yeah.
The absolute conceit and arrogance. And someone somewhere, they just don't have the finger in the pulse of modern society, in my opinion. But there we go. That's a wee connection between Ralfy and Canada. Apart from the fact that I've attended 2 of your whiskey festivals in the long and distant past. Enjoyed them very much. Wonderful people, the Canadians. Very polite, but I have to say, at times far too polite for their own good.
That might be true.
Sure.
We actually did an interview of Graham on the Whiskey Rant, which if you haven't already, you might like it.
Very insightful.
You may, if you have some time, want to check it out.
We talked to him about this exact thing, and we're like, this exactly happened to Glenbretton. Like, were you anticipating anything from the Scotch Whisky Association when you released your whiskey? And he said no. He said that there was no way that he thought using his own name would somehow bring a red flag up to the Scotch Whisky Association. He was completely blindsided by it, and we just felt for him, like how, and he had to negotiate essentially, and he dropped Caledonian and he just called it,
I think, and then he had to add the apostrophe S.
Yeah, he had to,
McAlone's.
right. It's like he was completely blindsided by that. He was not anticipating that from them at all.
Yeah, it's quite shocking because The Scotch Whisky Association's purpose is to look after the interests of the Scotch whisky industry on a global stage. And at this moment in time, a small Canadian distilleries using Scottish-like references, frankly, in my opinion, is the least of their troubles.
Right.
When you have the growing potential scandal relating to criminal involvement in cask investment scams and projects.
Wow.
This is serious. It's very serious. And recently, the Cask Investment Association was set up by people connected to the whisky industry to try and have some sort of governing body to at least advise, if not regulate, the whole speculative, increasingly speculative nature of cask investment programs, which are being sold through newspapers, on private media channels, and elderly people with retirement savings are being targeted. And I can see this going exactly the same way as the wine investment scams of the 1990s. It's going, the potential of embarrassment and damage to Scotch whisky's reputation, frankly, is enormous. And it appears at the moment, from my own perspective, that the Scotch Whisky Association is not doing anything to proactively manage an incoming crisis that whisky investment scams are going to be in the future. And this is made worse by the fact that there are some honourable players in this field. There are some good players who are trying to run proper businesses, but then you have other companies just popping up out of nowhere, and they appear to be allegedly fleecing, scamming, defrauding innocent customers. Not just in the UK, but particularly in the US.
Wow.
Yeah, I can see that.
Someone's already been arrested for it.
Yep, money, like, as soon as Scotch took off, whiskey in general, I mean, when there's that much influence in the market, there's always more for the scammers to take, right?
That's right.
Especially when you get articles about how whiskey is the #1 commodity for investment, more so than precious metals, than anything else in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Says who?
Yeah. Business magazines.
Business magazines, yeah. Business magazines.
Says the magazines.
Yeah.
Whoever pays the piper calls the tune.
Yeah.
Magazines are part of legacy media. They are not there to do much more than present their conventional message and make profit for the people that own it, and basically act as propaganda units.
Right.
I mean, we're all propagandists in our own way, but at least the onliners, the enthusiasts, just try and keep it even-handed, and anybody who doesn't soon gets called out.
Yeah.
Ralphie, with the whiskey landscape the way it is, and you've done 1,000 videos, I don't think that you've ever missed a week. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you ever experience any burnout? Is there ever a time where you're like, I don't want to go to the bothy today, I don't want to put out another video? Or is it your passion for finding new whiskeys, your passion for the community that keeps you going? Do you ever think about stopping, pausing, slowing down at all?
Well, absolutely, you're right. I've never missed a week in 14 years.
Yeah, amazing. That's amazing.
That is.
So, and at times, there was, for a couple of years, I actually did 2 reviews a week. Because it was the heyday of advertising income on YouTube for that sort of content. And I thought, well, make hay while the sun shines.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that I've been able to accommodate because I'm buying what I'm reviewing, and I'm reviewing what I want to buy. I'm not trying to say nice things about a bottle of whatever, which has been sent through by a marketing team who are just looking for a quick fix in their daily diary. And there's plenty of that happens. And I mean, good luck to those who get bottles to review. I just find it so much easier to buy what I'm reviewing. And I'm very fortunate I'm in the position where between the Google AdSense income and my Patreon supporters, I have a budget to buy whiskey, a bottle of whiskey to review every week. Having said that, you'll very rarely see anything over 18 years old getting reviewed. And recently I've started reviewing non-age statements because some of them are better quality and more reviewable and more easy to review than poor quality age-stated whiskies which are out there. So there are times definitely where I get all whiskied out, I open a bottle, I pour a glass and I can't smell a thing because it's not my decision consciously, it's my subconscious decision of my brain to say, sod this, I just want a glass of red wine. And there are times where I'll do 2 reviews back to back so I can take the next 10 days off completely dry with nothing more than a tiny little pour for a taster as I'm doing my research. Because I open the bottle about a month, 6 weeks before I review it, because you'll never get an accurate reading off a first taste. The senses need time to acclimatize to the singularity of the single malt. And as a result, you need to taste a whiskey, and it's tiny little volumes. You don't need any sort of major volume in the glass. In fact, that tends to be a waste. And you just have a wee sip, wee smell, another wee sip, wee smell, put it aside for an hour, come back to it. It's oxidized, it's opened up, you've added some water, you're starting to navigate it, put in the experience. And then basically at the end of it, you say, well, I'm glad I'm not one of these master blenders standing in an office all day with about 500 glasses in front of me of all the same single malt from the same distillery, but each one from a different cask. And first and foremost, my job is to kind of isolate the really bad casks that have completely spoiled the whiskey, and we've got no choice to get rid of them, but to get rid of them. And then I've got to sort out the best from the rest. And then I've got to sort out the priority to which they contribute to the following batches. I mean, that is such a chore. That's why when you ever see master blenders relaxing in a bar somewhere, or people who work in distilleries down at the local pub, they'll probably have a gin and tonic.
Or a beer.
The last thing they want, having worked all day with whiskey, is to have a glass of whiskey and be enthusiastic about it.
So like that hasn't happened for you. You still don't think that like this has become so much of a job that you're not still enjoying it. You're still enjoying everything you do, all the whiskey you try. You take breaks when you need to, but it's still a passion for you.
It is, because there's a couple of serious advantages I have in running a channel, in that the content that I bring each week is different because the bottles are different. Not because I'm saying things differently, but every time I open a different bottle of whatever I'm reviewing, it's a different experience because of the sheer diversity of smell and tastes of quality spirits, not just Scotch whisky, but rums, and occasionally bourbons. Occasionally, I've got a review of Brazilian whiskey coming up shortly from Union Distillery. Really, really interesting. Totally surprised by it. And of course, this is where on my Patreon channel, we've got a 2-way conversation going, which isn't possible in the comments section of your video on YouTube. So the quality of information that you can get going between commentators and contributors in my Patreon channel is just amazing. And I tell you, I'm spending half the time picking up tips from other people on what I should buy to review because they've bought it and they're just curious about my opinion. I mean, That's the reason I got the Cadenheads bottling from Union Distillery in southern Brazil. But another reason that I've managed to sustain success over 14 years is that I don't have the predisposition of being an alcoholic. And this is important. I can take whiskey or leave it. Sure, and when I was looking after my mum when she was around and she was getting a total handful because she was just too full of energy and I wasn't prepared to give her drugs to settle her down or whatever. You know, there was the only time in the day that I actually got a break was after she'd gone to bed. And that would be about from 12 to 2 in the morning. So I'd have about 7 or 8 whiskies and 2 bottles of beer. And it was my brother says, "You're drinking too much. Your nose is turning red." And I thought, damn it, he's right. So at that point, I just backed off. I had a total clean week and I thought, right, keep an eye on it. But apart from that, it's never been a problem. I'll go for, in fact, it's probably 4 nights a week now that I go to bed on a mug of cocoa. I don't touch alcohol at all. Because the more you segregate your totally sober days from your alcohol days, the fresher you keep your palate.
See, I told you.
And this actually started out before I took it over as a whiskey bothy. It was in fact a tool shed, and had lawnmowers in it and rakes and piles of plastic pots and all the rest of it that had just been absolutely abandoned for long years. So I just emptied it all out. Got a new little wooden tool shed. And once I'd emptied the place out, I thought, yeah, this is going to be ideal as a whiskey recording studio because it looks the part and it's the absolute antithesis, the exact opposite of the plummy, leather-chaired, roaring fire, baronial, fancy high-end bars which tend to feature in whiskey magazines with, you know, this illustration of old moneyed wealth.
Or 2 Canadian D-bags.
Well, you know, you can relate to this. The industry likes to present itself as aspirational, and it gets it totally wrong because it presents it as socio-economic aspirational rather than aspirational to enjoy and appreciate and develop a palate in the most extraordinary way that's possible, with actual engagement in many whiskies which are not only accessible but remarkably affordable. You know, when you look at what you can buy for $50, you know, you mentioned cask strength Benromach. I'm sure it's a lot more than $50, but the actual quality of that experience in relation to buying a luxury designer produce item like a handbag or a suit or a pair of trainers, you know, it's night and day.
Absolutely.
There's an awful lot of trash out there which masquerades as luxury high-end goods.
Actually, you're right. And the Benromach cask strength, just to speak to that really quickly, is, to my surprise, it was $97 Canadian.
Yeah, very good price.
Which was an excellent price.
Very good price for that. It still hasn't got the bump that other whiskeys
it's significantly less than most. I mean, Glenallachie is around the same price for the 10-year-old cask strength, but great price, I thought.
Well, let me tell you right now, guys, don't say too much about that because they will put the prices up.
Well, Ralphie, you know, it's nominated for Whiskey of the Year in the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. You know, it might receive a couple votes, and if it wins, then look out. Look out if it wins.
Right. So just for the record, the Online Scotch Whisky Award voting has concluded a few days ago for 2023. I am aware of both Roy and I are the only ones aware of who has won. and neither Roy nor myself are saying anything about it.
I'm sure there's someone at the Bonaccord that's like, feeding you a couple whiskeys and trying to poke you for some information here and there.
They'll be lucky they can poke away and feed all they want. My lips are sealed until the live stream from the Aquavit channel on Roy's channel of the Online Scotch Whisky Award official presentation with guests on Saturday, the 4th of November. And I'm sure you guys will provide a link below when this goes live.
We will, yeah. This will air the Monday, and then the Saturday will be like this Saturday will be the award show, I think.
The Saturday following when this airs.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're watching this, it's this Saturday coming up. So tune in.
Yeah.
November 4th. It's going to be very interesting. I'm super excited to see all these categories and what has been voted. Ralphie, you are a published author. You have 1,000 whiskey reviews, many more videos, lots of insight to the whiskey world. You have the Online Scotch Whisky Awards. What's next? What's on the horizon for Ralphie?
Right. Well, I'm celebrating the 1,000th review in the form of an installation in Glasgow at the beginning of November.
Okay.
Right. I will be at Good Spirits Company in Bath Street in Glasgow, which is a specialist whiskey retail shop. And I've known the guys for absolutely years. And I will have an art show there of A3 canvases on which photographs from my whiskey collection of photographs, some of them have been put on to the canvas, and I sign them all, Ralfy.com, to commemorate 1,000 reviews, 2009 to 2023. They're selling for £100 each, and all the money raised from the sale of the art is going to a food bank in Glasgow to support families with children who need assistance. Because the reason I'm into whiskey is because I was in Glasgow. Glasgow, over the decades, has done such a lot for me. So I'm doing something for Glasgow. And it's very modest, it's very small, but it's also quite important to me. And the 1,000th review is the perfect opportunity for an introvert who'd rather be in the bothy to actually get out and about. So it starts with the Online Scotch Whisky Awards on Saturday, the 4th of November. Then from Monday, the 6th of November to the Monday, the 10th of November, I will be at Good Spirits Company making occasional visits to the Bonaccord to also launch my beer, which I've commissioned from a local brewery called Whisky Chaser.
There you go.
And
very cool. I like the name. I like
it's our first, guys. Nobody's done it before. I've arranged with the distillery that they develop a recipe for a real ale which is perfect as an accompaniment to a whiskey.
Wow.
So it's got to be no more than about 4.5% alcohol. It mustn't be sweet. It's got to be clean, crisp, and malty. So it's that when you sip the beer, it's not going to interfere with the quality of the whiskey that you're drinking. Likewise, once you've had the whiskey, when you go to the beer, you'll see how it matches and complements. And we're launching this at the Bonaccord on tap only, not available in bottles or cans, only on tap in the bar for that week. I'll be doing a book reading in the Bonaccord. I'll be doing a little bit about the OSWAs in the Bonaccord. I will have 2 guest whiskey evening tastings, which, sorry guys, I can't say what it is until it goes public, because my Patreon subscribers get the first chance to get tickets.
There you go.
Right.
Well, we'll be there.
It's the fair way to do it.
Right.
I've also got Ardnamurchan are providing, as I did for my 10th anniversary, Ardnamurchan have agreed to provide a single barrel of 7-year-old heavily peated cask strength Ardnamurchan for Ralfy.
Wow.
Very nice.
Which will sell only at the Good Spirits Company. It's an absolute banger of a malt, and it's got my little emoji on the front, and I'll be signing a few bottles. And I approached Ardnamurchan and said, Ralphie here, do you fancy doing a Ralphie bottling? And I'm not looking for anything out of it apart from the bling. And the bling is that they are going to donate the profits to the Ben Foundation charity, which supports people with alcohol-related problems who have been or are working in the Scotch whisky industry.
Very nice.
That's awesome. Maybe we can work out a trade. We're not allowed to divulge just yet what's happening, or well, Jeremy's very reserved about it. He doesn't want to talk too much about it, but we'll let you know off recording what's happening. But
let's do a bottle swap.
We'll do a bottle swap if you're up for it. You know.
But Ralphie, we commend you for your philanthropy.
Yeah.
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy. Yes.
Yeah.
Philanthropy.
I
mean, finished yet, by the way. I haven't mentioned the signatory.
Oh, geez. Go ahead.
There you go.
Yeah. Got a single barrel of 16-year-old Glenlivet matured in a sherry hogshead, cask strength.
Very nice.
Wow.
All the profits from signatory are going into the Pitlochry community. They're going back to the distillery to go into local community projects. So that's the other one. And I've also, because I own a number of casks myself, so as to have the experience of owning casks, managing casks, and bottling casks to see how it's done, so I can talk sensibly about it. I've got some Ralphie bottling of 15-year-old Foursquare rum.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which has been maturing for 2 years in an ex-Madeira cask, fresh wet Madeira cask.
Very cool.
And I've also got 19-year-old Bruichladdich, single cask, and 10-year-old Glenord.
Wow.
Which will be a lot cheaper than the Bruichladdich, which is why I bottled it as well, to give people the option.
Nice.
So you're not slowing down at all. There's no slowing down for you.
There is and there isn't. And in that I've really, at 1,000 reviews, what I'm planning is the strategy of fair representation for those who are in a strict budget or those that don't have great availability of where they are, whiskey where they are. So next year, this year I did a world tour tasting review over 6 weeks, including Swedish whiskey, Indian whiskey, Australian whiskey. And next year I'll be looking out for the best of the blended malts, and I'll be looking out for some of the highlight traditional Scotch whiskey that actually deliver good value for the price that's being asked. That's my challenge. So there's fresh ways you can do it. What's important is I don't get too institutionalized here in the bothy and just pull out another bottle of whiskey and say a few nice things. So there will be rants, there will be controversy, there will be complaint letters to the invigilators at YouTube Central. It's going to happen. I still have a mixed reputation within the Scotch whisky industry, in that most people are quite happy I'm around, but some people find me annoying because I'm really not expert enough to be doing what I'm doing, because there's bloopers, because there's sometimes I don't even read the label of the bottle. I just go ahead and I just give an opinion, and it is an opinion. Yep. And it does piss some people off because they'd rather it was more organized and more, they'd rather Ralphie had a makeover and moved out this smelly, damp old bothy into more suitable premises where the lighting was better and the editing was more professionally done. What do you think, guys? Should I?
No,
absolutely
I think
not.
if you're not expert enough, then no one should be on YouTube doing whiskey reviews at all.
That's
true. No, we like your style. It's very raw. I know that you don't edit, and it's a one take. You post it up, and that's like so impossible for us to do. For me personally, and we commend you for that. And that's why I think a lot of people like your channel.
Yeah, I mean, the background here looks a little bit more professional than it actually is. I did it myself with my brother-in-law. We built it. I mean, my brother-in-law did most of it, but the TV is meant for entertaining myself, my kids when the channel shut off. So it's not necessarily, it looks more pretentious than it actually is. But no, I think you're great where you are.
The thing is, main thing is you've got the stashes of bottles behind you, including 15-year-old Springbank.
Yes, that's probably that one there is, well, there's two actually up there. One is from, I believe, January 2022, and the other one is from June 2022, and probably, dare I say, some of my favorite bottlings ever.
Yeah, you really like those ones. You really like those.
Yeah, they're really good.
Well, Ralphie, thanks so much again for joining the channel. It's always a huge pleasure and honor that you grace us with your presence, knowledge, everything you got going on. Everyone tune in to the Online Scotch Whisky Awards, November 4th. I'm very excited to see the winners announced with you and Roy. And excited to see all the stuff you've got coming up in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you for the plug. I do appreciate it. And by the way, thank you both for contributing to the OSWAs.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure for sure.
And this is the wonderful thing, is that the sheer geographical diversity of enthusiasts bringing their own geographical perspective of what's available or what's not available, or just what is actually significant in each category. And this is the great thing, that it evens the playing field so wonderfully well. And yet, at the same time, the industry's looking on saying, if we want to really know what our customers think of our product, or what our customers think are the best of Scotch whisky products, we don't have to employ consultants anymore. We'll just go and check the last edition of the Online Scotch Whisky Awards.
There you go.
Because the format is completely and totally democratic. One vote per person, and thousands have voted.
That's awesome.
Love that.
In the meantime, how about your plans? What's happening at Whisky in the Six? What's happening at
Sipper Social Club? Well, I mean,
we've been doing a lot of ranting. That's probably the majority of our content these days.
We like having these little discussions, taking a page from your book and ranting about things. We got our next podcast after this one will be about port matured whiskey, where it goes right, where it goes wrong. It seems like port is very finicky sometimes when you put whiskey in the barrel, and we discussed those, some good, some bad.
Absolutely, because port can have exactly the same effect as sherry. It can become this enormous overcoat on imposed on a whiskey that actually kind of wipes out the integrity of the character of the individual spirit. But great subject. I mean, the secret of success with any rant is to conclude it or start it by saying, in my opinion. Right?
Yes, that is very, very important.
Oh, we've learned that the hard way for sure.
Oh, you've the hard way. Oh, do share. Do share. Have you been threatened in any way?
we've had our fair share of trolls and individuals that feel they, we're going about it all wrong.
Yeah, the Ralfy.com comment section is very mild for the most part compared to some stuff that we see. But we give it back. I mean, I give it back to them just as hard as they give it to us. So it's you don't get away with a few things.
Yeah, I try to take a little bit.
You take the high road, and I take whatever road they're traveling on.
I just always got to remember that it could be my students on the other end of that comment.
That doesn't matter to me.
It's one thing to note is that with some of the wonderful people that surround us on this planet, it's not so much the insults you need to worry about, it's the compliments.
There you go.
That's a good point.
I like that.
That's a great point.
I like that. Ralphie, thank you so much. Again, really much appreciated.
Absolutely.
And see you on November 4th.
Yeah, and thanks, guys, for having me on your channel again. I appreciate it. I know I've been a little bit rambly, but hey, you know what to expect. And
love it.
I think you're very patient. And thanks for your quality questions.
Yeah, unlike what's his face at Springbank, where he had no questions for you.
He had four. I think it was four questions.
John. That's fantastic.
John, yeah, is there any questions for me? No.
You can't script it. You cannot script that. And it was great. It was great because I got enough of an interview. It was lighthearted. It was completely unexpected, and it was just John being John because he's such a practical, down-to-earth guy, and it's these kind of guys in the whiskey industry that actually keeps the machinery working. These are the people that actually make whiskey. They roll up their sleeves, they push barrels, they know how to work the forklift, they know how to repair casks when they start to leak, because it happens. They know how to lay out a malting floors. John's done it all. He is absolutely vital to the future, and people like him, to the future of Scotch whisky. So it's very rare that folk like John in a conventional interview would even get a look in. And sure, he didn't really want to say too much, but it was great. It just made it a very singular, different type of video. And when I asked him, is there any questions you want to ask me? And he says, no. I was just hilarious. It was a funny moment. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was great. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, it was really good.
Well, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you November 4th.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, guys. That's what they're doing for us. Thanks so much for watching, and cheers.
Cheers, everyone.